Hello and welcome to your Productivity Pulse with Michelle Oucharek-Deo, productivity coach and business entrepreneur for those who are tired of feeling like there is never enough time or energy to get it done, no matter what the it is. With over 30 years of experience, I decided to create a space and a place where we can talk, examine, and find solutions beyond the checklist and reimagine what productivity can look like for you in your business. Okay, so today I did a last-minute change of topic. My podcast on confidence, self-efficacy, and productivity was not coming together as I had first hoped. And as I continued down that path, I was losing momentum and thought, what are you doing, Michelle? You were literally wasting time being mad at yourself for not being able to pull together the idea of confidence and productivity. Yes, the irony was not lost on me, so I switched gears and thought, what can I share with my audience that one might find interesting and helpful? Well, I went over to Atticus, my writing platform. I am not an affiliate. I just really like using it as a platform for writing books. And I pulled up chapter 1 of the nonfiction book that I'm working on about time management and productivity and decided to read it to you. Well, throughout the reading, I'll stop once or twice to make a few comments. I'd like to invite you to listen and enjoy as I share this very rough draft with you. They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. Andy Warhol. My historical time-wasting habits. When I was 8 years old, my mom was diagnosed with a brain tumor. It was the late 70s, and all the neurosurgeons had back then was a saw, a scalpel, and a magnifying glass of sorts. She survived the brain surgery, but experienced a stroke on the operating table and lost 95% of her sight. When she finally came home, her recovery at times was confusing. I didn't understand what was happening, and in all honesty, neither did she. No one explained to us that in addition to having the brain surgery and the catastrophic loss of sight, that she had even had a stroke. They sent us blind as a family to manage. Looking back, I remember spending hours in the family room, sitting on the chocolate brown carpet in front of her recliner, watching TV shows while she slept and recovered. I didn't understand it at the time. I was a little girl. I just knew that watching TV made me feel better in the moment, and that being near her while she slept reduced the fear of what was going to happen next. I missed my before-surgery mom less while watching television. As I grew older, I continued the pattern of using television to fill identifiable and unidentifiable internal voids when they occurred in my life. It was not until I was in my early 40s when I started to appreciate and acknowledge how the amount of screen time in my life was having negative effects that I started researching and becoming more aware that sitting down in front of a screen was not actually relaxing me like I thought, but triggering the neurons to fire off in my brain. After that knowledge started to land, I tried many times to disrupt my time-wasting patterns of television watching and had short-lived success, but without a system, sheer determination and willpower were not enough. Then, at 48 years old, life's chaos unleashed itself in epic proportions. My father died of ALS, and 4 months later my mother died due to a surgical complication from another brain surgery. 2 weeks after that, my uncle died. Several months after that, I was diagnosed with 2 benign tumors in my uterus, resulting in months of excruciating pain and eventually an emergency hysterectomy that threw me into catastrophic menopause. And yes, it was as horrible as it sounds. Then, 2 months after that, came the global pandemic and the death of my beloved Lily, my golden doodle, who saved my life when my parents died. Okay, so I'm taking a break from the reading. It really was a most horrific time in my life, and sometimes I can't even believe I made it through it, but I did. And so you look back at times, at those kind of times in your life, and you wonder, how is it even possible to breathe? And I think that it's being able to write these kind of things down, taking time to be able to process out your emotions in such a way can make a huge difference. And once we are able to work through some of those emotions, we can get back to some of the more rhythmic areas of our life that can, increase our productivity and get us back on track. Okay, back to the story. My body was broken, my heart was broken, and yet I still had to mom, wife, and work every day. Each screen binge came with an excuse, all viable, all highly defensible. Yet it was not what I wanted. I wanted my time back. I wanted my life back. Then, unfortunately, as technology improved over the years, shows became more accessible and harder to say no to, and when they started rolling from one episode into another, I was done. Some would call it a coping mechanism, but coping mechanism or not, it was an unhealthy pattern, a secret I kept well hidden from my family and social network until 4 years later when my son moved to the other side of the country to start school and I was thrown into a new life adventure that has brought me here. The shift, my internal time core. My son has always given me so many gifts throughout his growing years, but when he left for university, he returned something to me he borrowed on the day he was born. Time. My time. Michelle time. Non-mom time. I thought it was the answer, but it wasn't. Not yet, anyways. Until Owen was physically out of the house, the complete picture of how much time and brain power I'd been allocating to being a mom, grieving daughter, wife, counseling art therapist, friend, colleague, and volunteer had been lost on me. My deeper goals and aspirations had been pushed to the back of my plate, and what little time I did have was being eaten up with my time-wasting screen habit. At times I suspected it, but until I was living with the returned minutes, I had not made the full connection. Dropping him at the airport, I cried. Then a couple of days later, I was excited. I was going to do everything I had been putting off for almost 20 years. 14 glorious days ticked by, and then wouldn't you know it, on day 15 of him leaving for school, this mom started to miss him. The routine, the knocking on his door, checking in, all those glorious minutes given back to me, and I was lost. At first I pretended that moving across the country and taking his big energy with him didn't bother me. Don't get me wrong, I was so excited that he had gotten into the program he wanted, but his absence left a much bigger hole in my world than I anticipated. I tried to find things that would distract me. Work was a great distraction during the day, but then came the evenings. My husband was settling into the sans child lifestyle, but me, not so much. Since my parents' death, I fought hard to cut back on watching television shows and had some short-lived success. But on about day 16 after Owen's departure, I fell headfirst into the hole I had been fighting to crawl out of since I was 8 years old. I remember that night. I happened upon a show that took me in and swept me up in the drama and adventure. It was like I was a little girl again, television taking me away from the reality of my life. It was great. It was horrible. No, it was great. That was how my mind played things out every time I let one episode roll into the next. Before I knew what happened, 4 weeks had passed, and I had successfully watched over 90 episodes of a program, spending 3,612 minutes or just over 60 hours watching the show in 25 days. This wasn't the first time I had fallen deep into a screen binge, but it was the last. When I finished the last episode of the series, it felt like I had just woken up from a 4-week time-wasting bender, and something had to change. I was dealing with a time-wasting hangover that left me irritated and wanting to understand what had just happened to me. I was fed up. There were no other options. I needed to change. I felt ashamed. I wanted something different. I needed to take back my time. With 52 years of reflection and thousands of clinical hours within my professional practice behind me, it took my final screen binging extravaganza for me to begin analyzing the historical trauma in my life and how my body and mind had linked television to the perception as an ultimate stress reliever. I thought that falling into someone else's world gave me a reprieve from dealing with my own pressures, and I guess in some ways it did for a little while. But like eating junk food when you're hungry, your body eventually needs more substance. So I began. I began to break it down, and the part that continued to niggle at the back of my brain that I could not let go of was the sheer amount of time I spent frozen in front of the screen and the colossal loss of opportunities that I had missed. So what happens when a coping mechanism to deal with one issue takes over and causes a whole realm of other problems? Please understand, I like a good movie or show or social media reel, like many other people. But what if the screen you've landed in front of becomes a distraction from dealing with your life? What if by watching the next episode, playing the next game, or watching the next reel, it's actually stealing something away from you or creating another barrier for you to move forward? With this level of thinking done and confirmation in place that something needed to change in my life, it was time to figure out a different way, and maybe, just maybe, I could help myself and someone else look at time from a different perspective. And so this is where the 42-minute hour was born. Now, I'm just going to step off from the book right now. And so, I've gone over what the 42-minute hour is, and I will revisit it again sometime in the next few episodes, just so that people can be reminded of the process and of some of the different time blocking methodologies that I have. But let's jump back. What I discovered during the analysis phase blew me away, and I began to weave all the golden threads of my internal time core back together. Did you know? The economics of screen addiction. During my research, I found a lot of books that talked about how to improve your time management skills and productivity. And I am ever so grateful for books like James Clear's Atomic Habits or Cal Newport's Deep Work. But it was not until I dove deeper into the topic of platform binging and screen addiction that it became clear we are in the middle of a silent epidemic right now, and the economics of lost time and increased mental health and wellness challenges in our society are staggering. The article, How Internet Addiction May Change Adolescent Brains, written by Bella Isaacs-Thomas for brainfacts.org, sent a chill up my spine, as the most recent research that is coming to light from around the world is that young people of this generation cannot function without some sort of device in their hands. I personally see this as a greater challenge than just a young person's problem. You don't have to go far to see many parents at a soccer game with their heads in their laps, or when going out for dinner and all the cell phones that are placed on the dining room table lined up beside people's cutlery. The New York Times also published an article titled Americans Lose 36 Days a Year to Content Consumption, and it's worse for Gen Zs. That is 864 hours on average a year people are spending with their eyes glued to a screen, and that excludes the time they spend on screens for work or direct school. Although internet addiction has not become a formal diagnosis in the US or Canada yet, Isaacs-Thomas notes in her article that the condition is recognized by countries like China and South Korea. I think it will be imperative for research to continue in this area for someone to study how many people over 35, 45, even 55 cannot live without their phone, computer, or favorite streaming platform at the ready. What is the expectation of being in business now, or being a university student? How many people, no matter the age, have their cell phones on and beside them at least 22 hours a day? Interesting to note that in some school districts within North America, cell phones are being banned for many reasons. The question I have is, can banning a cell phone change people's habits and improve their use of time? I highly doubt it, but I'm always open to having a discussion on the topic. I believe that people have to choose to use their time in a different way with more intention and accountability for there to be the potential of substantial change. Okay, so there you have it. That's part of the first chapter. There's another piece that I think I may actually just use maybe as a bonus episode down the road. Not sure, but I'll leave you with that. And just remember that with intentionality and accountability, I truly believe that we can increase our productivity. And when we start looking at things like some of the topics within this chapter about our screen usage, and that if we can really just narrow down what it is that we want to be doing with our time, how we're using our cell phones, things along those lines, that we can actually make a difference. So that's it for me this week, and I hope that you enjoyed this little snippet of chapter 1 of the new book that I'm working on, and I look forward to more conversations about productivity, time management, and all those amazing things that you can do with the 168 hours that you are given every single week. Thank you so much for spending your time with me on this episode of Your Productivity Pulse. If today's conversation sparked a moment of action or reflection, I invite you to keep that momentum going. More practical strategies designed to enhance productivity, reduce stress, and weave balance back into your life can be found by joining my newsletter at vanartexpression.com. Once there, just head over to your Productivity Pulse podcast page to sign up, or you can find the link in the show notes. Remember, intention plus accountability equals productivity. Until next time, keep listening to your pulse.